Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome dear learners. This is a video for the subject of education, for the course of Bachelor's in Education and for the paper of Child Development and Learning. This particular video is based on Kohler's views on learning, and here we are going to discuss Kohler's theory of insightful learning in detail. This video is recorded by Dr. Aerum Khan. The course coordinator for this video is Dr. Aerum Khan from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. She is also the presenter of this video. The academic expert or reviewer for this video is Professor Jasim Ahmed from Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. This video is produced under the project DTH Swayam Prabha channels of MHRD, New Delhi. Hello dear learners, I am Dr. Aerum Khan, Assistant Professor at IASC Faculty of Education, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi. In today's discussion, we will be studying about Kohler's view on learning. And here in this particular lecture, there will be the discussion on the Kohler's theory of insightful learning. So let us start the discussion with first understanding that what exactly this Gestalt field or insightful learning is all about. So the learning theory, which is named as learning by insight, is the contribution of these Gestalt psychologists. So the Gestalt psychology began with the work of German psychologists who were studying the nature of perception. Wertheimer is generally considered to be the founding father of Gestalt psychology. So Wertheimer, Kohler, Kafka, Kurt Lewin, all these four people or the psychologists were originally German, but eventually they settled to America. They are the leaders of what we actually know historically as the Gestalt psychology. Gestalt is a German word, a German noun, for which there is no any English equivalent, which is very much near about it. So the term was carried over in English as is, and in the psychological literature, this is taken like it is adapted from German. So the nearest, if we want to translate it, the nearest English translation of Gestalt is configuration, or more simply, an organized whole, which is in contrast to the collection of parts. So Gestalt psychologists consider the process of learning as a gestalt, an organized whole. So a thing cannot be understood by the study of its constituent parts, but only by the study of it as in totality. So it is the basic idea behind this theory, that we have to understand anything. If we want to study something, only the study of parts will be not sufficient until unless we go and study about the whole. So in totality, we have to study anything for which we are trying to go in depth. So after this, if we try to understand this Gestalt psychology more, we can say that in practical sense, Gestalt psychology is primarily concerned with the nature of perception. So according to this particular psychology, an individual perceives the thing as a whole, while the behaviorist and stimulus response theorists define perception in such a way in which, like, we can make it very much similar or analogous with taking photographs. So they think that sensation comes prior to meaning and consider these two acts as separate. But these Gestalt psychologists do not separate sensation of an object from its meaning. They are of the opinion that, or they opined that unless a person sees some meaning in an object, he or she will pay little or no attention to uh, to this particular situation, or there will be no any importance given to this particular situation. So according to the Gestalt psychologist, perception always involves a problem of organization. A thing is perceived as a relationship within a field, which includes the thing, the viewer, and the complex background, incorporating the viewer's purpose and previous experiences. So there is the thought which is actually the base of Gestalt psychology is very important, that the perception is always the meaningful observation. So the Gestalt psychologists tried to interpret learning as a purposive, exploratory, and creative enterprise instead of trial and error or simple stimulus response mechanism. Learner, while learning, always perceives the situation as a whole, and after seeing and evaluating the different relationships intelligently, this person who is actually the respondent at this moment takes a proper decision. This person always responds in terms of proper relationship rather than specific stimulus. So the Gestalt psychology use this particular term of insight. So which actually, this insight actually describes the perception of the whole situation by the learner and of his or her intelligence in response to the proper relationships. So this particular term, insight, is very much important whenever we are talking about the Gestalt psychology. So now let us discuss about Wolfgang Kohler. Kohler was born in 1887 and he died in 1967. Kohler was a German psychologist and he was a phenomenologist also. Just like Vardemir and Kafka, he contributed to the creation of Gestalt psychology. So Kohler was the first person who used the term insight to describe the learning of apes. Kohler conducted many experiments on chimpanzees, and he actually published all his experiments and his study in a book which was named as Mentality of Apes. This book was published in 1925. Uh, all these experiments which were resulted and published in this book were done during the period of 1913 and 1917, and these experiments were done in an isolated place, and this place was known as Canary Island. So these experiments show learning by insight in a very splendid way. We will be discussing about this insight theory in detail. And Kohler is a very important person whenever we are talking about the Gestalt psychology. And the review of General Psychology survey, which was published in 2002, ranked Kohler as the 50th most cited psychologist of the 20th century. So we can see that he is placed at a very important place, and he's very important whenever we are talking about the Gestalt psychology. So now let us discuss the different experiments which were conducted by Kohler at different points of time. So in one experiment which we are going to study first, Kohler put a chimpanzee and he named this chimpanzee as Sultan. So Sultan was kept inside a cage and a banana was hung from the roof of the cage. A box was placed inside this particular cage. So the chimpanzee tried to reach the banana by jumping, but he was not able to succeed. Suddenly, he observed that this chimpanzee has got an idea and he used the box as a jumping platform by placing it just below the hanging banana. So this was something which Kohler was observing. So this was the one experiment. Then what he did, he actually made the other experiment, and in this other experiment, he made a bit more complicated setup. So Kohler made this problem more difficult, and what he did, now for making this banana taken, it required 2 or 3 boxes for reaching to the banana. So the placing of one box over the other was now required, and also there were different specific arrangements which were required in order to take the banana. So this was the other experiment. Then what he did, he made the next experiment a bit more complicated. Now the banana was placed outside the cage of the chimpanzee sultan, and 2 sticks were placed near the cage. One was larger than the other, and these sticks were actually placed inside the cage. One was hollow at one end so that the other stick could be inserted into it to form a longer stick, and the banana was kept in a way that it could not be picked up by using only one stick. So it was a compulsion or a kind of arrangement that if this chimpanzee is willing to take the banana by the use of stick, then he has to insert one stick with the other, then only he can go and get the banana using the sticks. So this was the other experiment. So the chimpanzee first tried these sticks one after the other, but he failed. Obviously, he will fail because the sticks were not that long that they can reach to the banana, like if only one stick is used. Suddenly, this chimpanzee got a very bright idea. The animal, this particular chimpanzee, joined the 2 sticks together and reached the banana. So in these experiments, Kohler used many different chimpanzees, and Sultan, who was the most intelligent of Kohler's chimpanzees, could solve all the problems. So other chimpanzees could solve the problem only when they saw Sultan solving the problems. So in this way, he actually conducted all his experiments where he tried to establish that there is something which is known as or called as the insight. So with such type of experiments, Kohler concluded that in the solution of problems, his chimpanzees did not resort or find the solution with the blind trial and error mechanism. They solved their problems intelligently. Kohler used the term insight to describe the learning of his chimpanzees. Whenever we are talking about insight, it involves certain criteria. So let us see that what are these criteria which have to be there if we are talking about insight. So the first criteria is that the situation as a whole is perceived by the learner or should be perceived by the learner. The number 2 criteria is that the learner tries to see and judge the relationship between various factors involved in the situation. And the next criteria is that as a result, the learner is helped in the sudden grasping of the solution of the problem. So spontaneously, or you can say that that particular solution arrives to the mind of this learner in a spontaneous or in a sudden way. So this is something which is called as insight, or whenever we are talking about insight, these things should be there, then only it will be considered as the insightful learning. So on this similar line, other experiments were also conducted by different Gestalt psychologists. So all the experiments have shown that at some stage there is new organization of the perceptual field resulting in sudden discovery of the solution. So therefore, we can say that learning according to the Gestalt psychologists is the restructuring of the field of perception through the process of insight. So as a whole, insight depends on certain factors. So first of all, we have to see that what are these factors on which insight is basically depending on. So the first factor here is experience. What is experience? The past experiences, basically the past experiences. So these past experiences help in the insightful solution of the problems. A child cannot solve the problem of modern mathematics unless this child is well acquainted with uh, its language, or there should be some basic understanding of mathematics. Then only certain problems which are of complicated nature can be solved by this child. So experience is the first factor. Then we have got the second factor, which is intelligence. What is this factor? Actually, what exactly this factor mean? So the insightful solution depends on the basic intelligence of the learner. So the more intelligent an individual is, the greater will be his or her insight. So we have seen in the experiments made by Kohler that the chimpanzee Sultan was the most intelligent. That is why he was having the insights more rapidly, and the other chimpanzees were just looking towards what exactly Sultan is doing, and they were getting the idea that how to solve the problem. So the second factor is intelligence. The next factor is the learning situation. What is this? We have to see that how insightfully the organism will react, and it depends on the situation in which this person has to act. So some situations are more favorable than other situations for this insightful solution. So as a common observation, insight occurs when the learning situation is so arranged that all the necessary aspects are open for observation. So here we can see that the situations which were provided by Kohler in the experiment which he actually performed on chimpanzees, these situations were also very much important, so that this particular insight phenomena can be observed. So learning situations are very much important. If there are positive learning situations, we can observe that there is a better learning happening even in our classrooms. So now let us see the next factor. The next factor is the initial efforts. What is this initial efforts? So we can see that the insightful learning has to pass through the process of trial and error to certain extent. But this stage does not last very long. These initial efforts in the form of simple trial and error mechanism open the way for insightful learning. But you can't say that they are going to last very long. The initiation process will happen with this trial and error, but in the like once we go ahead, we can't rely on trial and error whole soul, like wholly. So this is the next factor which is responsible for the insight learning, this which is initial efforts. Now let us see the next factor. The next factor is the repetition and the generalization. Repetition and generalization. So after having one insightful solution of a particular type of problem, the organism, or let's take the example of a chimpanzee, tries to repeat it in another situation and demanding similar type of solutions. So the way found in one situation helps this person or a subject or a chimpanzee or anybody to reach insightfully in the other identical situations. So this is something which actually once you practice, you make repetitions of the actions which were done in one situation. What happens at times, you get the solution of any other type of problem which is more or less similar in nature. So this type of the factor which is known as repetition and generalization is the very important factor responsible for insightful learning. and the generalization is only happening once you get the results again and again. Then only you can generalize that this can be done to get this result, and in different situations you follow that particular practice to get similar type of results. So these were the different factors which are responsible for getting the insight or for the insight learning. So after getting acquainted with the different factors related to the insightful learning, let us see the different educational implications of the theory of insightful learning. This theory brings the important facts into limelight, into the daylight. What are those facts, or what are those implications which we have got through this theory? We will just discuss one by one. So the first thing is that the whole is greater than the parts, and therefore the situation should be viewed as a whole. So whenever we are asking our students to solve a problem, we have to make a practice that our students analyze the problem in parts as well as in whole. Then only they will become a good problem solver. Otherwise they will be not in a position to solve the problem whenever such type of problem or similar kind of problem is given to them for the next time. So this particular point is very much important for classroom teaching as well. Number two is that we should not use the mechanical trial and error in our classroom a lot. So this particular trial and error method should be minimized in our classroom practice. So the learner should try to see relevant relationships and act intelligently while solving any problem. And the teacher should facilitate this intelligent learning, making relationships with the parts to make a whole. So these type of things should be very much initiated and facilitated in the classroom. Then the next educational implication is that the purpose or motive plays the central role in the learning process. As we have seen in the example, in the experiment of chimpanzee Sultan, that the motive was very much clear. The motive was to get the banana, and then there were certain things, certain arrangements and making up of situations and all those different practices which were actually adapted by this chimpanzee to get to a single motive which was clearly placed in front of him, that he has to get the banana by climbing on different boxes or by joining the two sticks and getting to the banana. So this purpose or motive in the classroom process should be made very much clear, should be very much like mentioned in a way that it becomes the central role of the learning process. Then only the child will focus and get to the aim. So based on all these factors which were revealed by this theory, teachers are required to pay attention on some of the points which were actually mentioned by Kohler, and we are just going to discuss these points which actually teachers have to take care of. So now we will discuss some of the points where teachers should pay attention. So the first point is that the subject matter or the material which is taught at one particular time should be presented in gestalt form. What exactly it means? While teaching the topic, parts of, let's take an example of a flowering plant or a flower. It should not be started by presenting the different parts. Initially, what the teacher should do, the plant or flower as a whole should be presented before the learners, and later on the parts should be emphasized. So the problem of mathematics required solution should be presented as a whole, and after grasping the entire problem in totality as a whole, it should be tried for the solution. So this is something which is the most important point which the teachers should actually take care of. The next point which the teachers should pay attention on is that in the organization of the syllabus and planning of the curriculum, the Gestalt principle should be given due consideration. A particular subject should not be treated as the mere collection of isolated facts or topics or content or different concepts. It should be closely integrated into a whole. And we can say that the curriculum, which is comprising different subjects and activities, should reflect unity and cohesiveness. And this is the reason why we follow integrated approach in our curriculum, which is even considered important and adapted by NCERT while developing the national curriculum framework. We have got a integrated curriculum where we can see that in one subject there is involvement of the other subject, and the totality is given very much important. So we don't teach or we don't learn a concept or a topic in isolation. Whatever is related with this topic is also taught while we are taking up that particular topic. The next point is that we have seen that this theory of Gestalt psychology, or this particular theory of insightful learning, has brought motivation in the forefront by assigning purpose and motive or the central role in the learning process. So in case of the experiment, we have seen the motivation point or the central role or the motive was very much clear, the banana, for this particular chimpanzee in the experiment. So this motive or the role of motivation or the centrality of the aim should be very much clear while the learning process is going on. So the child should be motivated by arousing this child's interest and curiosity, and she should be well acquainted with the specific aim and purpose of her learning. Then only this child will be focusing in a better manner to achieve the goal. So the clarity of the the entire purpose or the aim should be very much like clearly mentioned to the child. So the next point which the teacher should consider is the greater contribution of the insight theory of learning is basically that it made learning an intelligent task requiring mental abilities instead of just making it a kind of automatic response or a kind of a specific stimuli arousal process. So it has called a, a kind of a halt to age-old mechanical memorization or rote learning, or a kind of drill or practice work, which actually basically lack in basic understanding and use of thinking, use of reasoning, and the creative mental powers. So we have seen that earlier, most of the times we were giving very much importance to rote memorization, but once we understood the importance of insightful learning or this insight theory, we started giving due importance to the intelligent learning. And this intelligent learning is actually acclaimed by lots and lots of other psychologists also. So all these points are some which the teachers should pay a lot of attention, because they constitute the class interesting, motivated, and actually the most important place for a child. So with this, now we have reached to the end of this particular topic. We have seen today that the insightful learning is a theory of learning which is evolved out of the attempts of the Gestalt psychologists. And we have also seen that the main intention in this direction was taken by Kohler. He, for the first time, used the term insight for describing the learning of his subjects in different experiments, and the subjects were the chimpanzees or the apes. And through his number of experiments, Kohler concluded that an individual, while learning a way to solve the problems, does not resort to only trial and error mechanism, but rather this person reacts intelligently by using the insight, which is the perceiving situation in a gestalt form. And what exactly here the gestalt mean? As a whole. Gestalt form basically means as a whole. So perceiving the problem as a whole and then evaluating all the possibilities of finding solution in given confronting situation and then arriving at an insightful solution. So this was a kind of crux of the insightful learning theory which was given by Kohler. So I hope that this theory will be very much helpful for you all because it has got a lot of educational implications which we are discussing. While discussing this theory, we have discussed the educational implications also. Even in the classroom practices, we have seen that motivation, a clear-cut uh, kind of display of the aims, the motives, whenever these type of things are there, the learning process becomes much more easier and much more interesting. So all these things are very much important whenever we are talking about the classroom practices either. So with this, I hope that this particular theory will be clear to you all, and these are few of those references and the links which I have consulted while developing this particular lecture. And I hope that the lecture proves to be useful for you all, and we will be seeing each other in a different lecture some other time. Thank you so much. You were watching a video on Kohler's views on learning, and this lecture was based on Kohler's theory of insightful learning. This video lecture was recorded by faculty at home during the national lockdown period for COVID-19 pandemic using minimal technical resources. Technical errors, if any, are unintentional and may please be ignored. For any queries with regard to this lecture or broadcast, kindly send your email to techsupport@dth.ac.in. Thank you so much.